Hello everyone, I am here with Andrew Navaro, head of studio for Fantasy Flight Games, and X-Wing 2nd Edition has just been announced. Super exciting stuff, and we're here to get some answers from you about how that affects old players, how that affects new players, and why FFG made this decision. So, to frame the conversation, let's just kick it off with, why did FFG make the decision for X-Wing 2nd Edition?
I think, really at the heart of it is that this game's done really well. When it was conceived and originally designed, it's a lot of fun, worked really great, but as we continued to add more and more ships and expansions to the line, the limitations of the design space really started to show, and I think that most really ardent fans would agree with that. That the last couple of years of expansions have just add more and more complexity that feels like it's kind of bolted on to the core experience instead of being part of that core experience. So I think we always kind of just had this feeling like, man, I wish there was more we could do to make these ships feel more unique. I wish we had more knobs and dials we could turn to add more value through more expansions, add more ships, because Star Wars has so many awesome ships we can bring to the table, without them feeling the same, and then without them feeling like they have a big wall of text, and that's the thing that defines them and makes them different from the other ships that share the same basic stats. So I think we always kind of knew in the back of our minds that at some point we're going to have to do this because this is going to break under the weight of trying to add mechanical complexity to all the expansions.
Yeah.
So really the reason why we're doing a second edition is that we can put the game in a much better spot mechanically where we can expand on it for many, many, many years. And there's a lot more room within the basic stats, within the different maneuvers, that we can make differentiations between ships and make them feel more unique, and then still also have the ability to do cool text abilities on the ships that set them apart as well.
So when you did Game of Thrones 1st Edition to 2nd Edition, and that was a lot of kind of the old collectible card game mechanics had, again, kind of then bolted on to this system over time, and then you rebooted it. Is this a dramatic, different X-Wing than what traditional X-Wing players, 1st Edition players, have grown up playing? Are the ships different? Is the feeling the same, or is this a new experience?
I think ultimately it feels very much the same. I think you're going to feel right at home, and it's going to feel great. And I think a lot of the changes we're making are really just kind of usability changes and baking that into the core system. Where some abilities that were text abilities before that were written out longhand have now become icons and are part of the core system that we can expand upon. So while we've kind of changed the amount that's at the core, it's not stuff that I think most X-Wing players are going to be unfamiliar with. It's just presented in a slightly different way. We have added a couple of little wrinkles, but again, it's not going to feel like a huge departure, I think, from the 1st Edition X-Wing experience.
What about, did you have specific goals coming into this process? I imagine in my head a bulleted list, of that plan of okay, here's the things that we need to accomplish for a 2nd edition of this game. Do you have that?
Yeah. Jeez. Well, I think
Going to your drive document.
Well, yeah, exactly. Let me think about all the things we talked about at the very beginning. Top of the list, like I mentioned just a moment ago, was putting the game in a spot where it could be that it could live for much longer and not break under that development weight, like the 1st edition was, really straining against the limitations of the design space. So that, I think, was really it was goal number one, was to try to re-envision it in a way that it could be expanded for longer and live on and much, much longer without feeling like we were really stretching. So I think that was the primary concern, because we wanted to live for a long time and be very healthy and continue to be a very healthy and successful line. And beyond that, there's lots of little things that we were able to do that I think again, with the experience of having done first edition, if we had known, we wanted to do a bunch of different firing arcs and turrets and all sorts of things, like we did so many different variations of firing arcs and like little tokens that indicated things, and like we'd kind of like experiment with it almost from wave to wave sometimes. That we could build that into the graphic design and the presentation from the beginning. So it's the original, like just for example, like the first edition X-Wing pilot tokens. They have a bunch of information at the bottom, like all the stats and stuff,
right,
and the initiative number and everything. But at the end of the day, like as people played the game, we found that people didn't really reference those numbers really at all while they were on the table, and they just kind of got in the way of us being able to present things like firing arcs in a pleasing way that was easy to read. So having all that information at our disposal now, we were able to make a much cleaner, nicer looking, easier to read on the table pilot token. And then doing things like for usability, like on the dials, having red and green maneuvers for maneuvers that gave you stress or relieved it, didn't help colorblind people very much. Sure. So changing the green maneuvers to blue maneuvers is very, very simple change, but hopefully that'll make the accessibility of the game a little bit better for some people. And one thing we also wanted to make sure we included this time around and had a little bit more of a focus was force powers and bringing the force into the game. Force is its own statistic now with certain pilots who are force sensitive, and that's again another thing that is baked into the core design that we'll be able to explore going forward.
Well, one of the main things I think that happened here too is the shift away from points printed on the cards and your pilots and the upgrade slots and these kinds of things. So why was that done, and how does it work now?
Yeah, well, that's another thing too, and that's like maintaining balance in the metagame with a game with printed components is really challenging.
It's not like computer games.
No,
right?
you can't
just patch it immediately.
Right. Maybe one day you'll download magical ink to your card and it'll just automatically update. That'd be pretty sweet. So obviously that's a limitation, but we still want to have a physical game. We want to have cards and like components that you can hang on to and play with, and it feels like a fun tactile experience. But yeah, I feel like the decision to remove the points and the upgrade slot icons from the pilots is huge, and to have those rest in the app gives us the ability to make balance tweaks as necessary as they come up through how the players play with it in the metagame and how things shake out in tournaments. It'll help us really avoid a lot of any kind of potential like conflict at the table where you could come to a tournament with a thing and it's not printed. It's the old printing, so it doesn't have any errata. It doesn't have any point cost adjustments. And you sit down and play, and like your opponent says, "Oh no, that's not. That doesn't work that way anymore." Which I think I've talked about before. Like it's one of the biggest, most frustrating things you can I think experience in competitive tabletop gaming. So removing that entirely, putting it in the app or the web tool, like it's also available. It'll be available online on the website. What I think really puts the game in a really great place and for competitive play, and really gives our organized play team the tools they need to make adjustments as necessary and not feel like they're jerking people around all the time by changing that stuff. Because it's always updated live. You never have to like download a document and then print out that document and bring it and then make sure it's the most recent version. You always know you're going to have the most recent version because you're going to have it right there on your device, or you're going to have it online on your computer.
So you can push, basically developers at any moment can push new point costs, new upgrade slots, take things away at any moment.
Yep.
That happens live. Now, what happens to somebody who doesn't have their iPhone or their smartphone with them at a tournament? Are they going to be able to still compete?
Oh yeah, I mean you don't need to have your device with you when you come to play. You will need to and honestly, you don't even need to. I don't know if we're going to have to require people to build their lists using the squad builder. You just need to have access to it beforehand, but you don't need to have it with you in the moment. And I think, just like with our current updates to point costs and errata and stuff, we'll make those in advance, well enough in advance of any kind of major tournaments, where people will have plenty of time to digest that information. We're not going to be like the night before push an update, like surprise, that list you brought is useless. No, we're not going to do anything like that. So and just because we have the ability to tweak things really from a moment-to-moment basis, we're not going to be doing that.
How do you fight that temptation, though? You get these tournament results, and it's like,
Yeah, well, we'll adjust them, but we're not going to be adjusting them like day by day. You're not going to be like checking your phone for updates to make sure that like, oh, did they change it from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock
round
this afternoon?
3 of the tournament?
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. Oh, we got to make a quick change. No, we're not going to do anything like that. And I think the other thing, the other cool thing that the app allows is it gives the organized play team like an opportunity to do like really cool, unique tournaments, and like deciding like, for this tournament we're going to make these ships are legal, or for this tournament we're going to have classic era ships only, or like we can do that from for our official tournaments, or like from a store level. If you're just having a tournament in your store, you can define the parameters of your player group. So if your player group's really into one kind of thing, you have a very easy way of communicating that to that group through that app. It's pretty sweet.
That's great.
Yeah, it's fun.
We've been thinking about that at the store all the time, being able to restrict those formats and play to that player group.
It's a lot of flexibility,
Super
which is something that we haven't really had in organized play to date, is that amount of flexibility to allow us to do just fun things without with very minimal risk.
Yeah. So what about old players, traditional players playing first edition, watching something like this, probably are starting to get some news or have gotten news about second edition, have a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. The first being, are all my old ships worthless? Do I have to rebuy everything? Which sometimes happens, right? So how do old players handle the transition into this second edition?
All right. Well, no one's ships are worthless. All your ships are valid, which is like the number one most important message. If you didn't want to rebuy anything, you're not going to have to rebuy any individual ships. If you're an old player and want to play a second edition, you're going to need the core set. And then we'll have a series of conversion kits. And we're breaking those down by faction. So if you're a dedicated player of a single faction, you're just going to need the core set and then that one conversion kit. If you're a player who wants everything, plays everything, then you're going to need to get the core set and then each of those individual conversion kits.
And that converts essentially all of the cardboard components from the old edition into the new edition.
It's the cardboard components, it's the cards, it's the upgrade, it's the pilot cards, upgrade cards. There's a lot of content in those conversion kits. It's a lot of stuff.
Are you going to continue releasing those first edition ships in second edition? Like, are these new products going to come out that are the same ships but with second edition essentially stuff?
Yes. So we're going to release those as quickly as we can. So I've worked with our production department at the very beginning, pretty much maybe about a year ago at this point, to figure out like what is the fastest possible pace we could release second edition versions of old ships to the consumers. And we came up with that number, and that is how quickly we're going to do it. So so every ship that currently exists in first edition will be making its way into second edition. But there's a lot of ships, and that'll take time. And we don't want releasing old ships to get in the way of us creating new stuff. So as the line moves forward over the next few years, like, you'll see a bunch of new stuff still coming out, but then you'll also see those old ships make their way to market with the second edition packaging and all the second edition componentry. So everything will come out eventually.
We definitely noticed those S foils on the new X-Wing
Yeah.
moving. So is that planned for these re-releases, right? Are they going to be different? Are they going to look different, act different, or are they just going to be the same sculpt?
So some will be the same, and some will be different.
Nice.
Where we can make improvements, we're making improvements. So I think we've announced the Y-wing by this point, and I think that's a ship that internally, like that was like one of the very first like X-wing ships that we made and produced.
Yeah.
And after we gained more expertise, like that's also a ship that everyone kind of looked at and like, yeah, man, I wish we did that one a little bit better. So that's a completely new sculpt. It looks
beautiful.
It looks fantastic. So that's an example of like the type of thing that we're going to be. That's the type of thing that we're going to be doing. So we have the Fang Fighter which is from the Rebels TV show. When we originally did that ship, we just had like an image of what it looked like, and we just based it like on just a handful of images. We didn't know how it would behave in the show at the time. Then saw the episodes, and like the wings like pivot around it in this really sweet way, and it never flies in this like really flat profile like the way we made the ship. So that's another example. Like, well, clearly we need to fix that. So that's another cool one where the wings will rotate around that cockpit. Cool. It's pretty badass.
What about the factions? So the factions are being broken out too, right? So
yes.
We've traditionally had the three, and now we're going with busting out the First Order and the Resistance.
Right.
What's the thinking behind that? Like, why do we need more factions in the game?
Well, I think more factions is fun. I think it gives us the ability to maintain balance better. Like, continuing to funnel all the ships into like 3 buckets just makes balancing an individual faction more and more challenging. So that's one aspect of it. The other is the way that Star Wars has changed. In that when we first launched X-Wing, like there was no First Order or Resistance. So it wasn't
like decades ago.
Yeah, it wasn't
happened.
a thing. Yeah, and when we introduced them to the game, we've very intentionally made those card backs of the pilots different to show that they were First Order and Resistance and not Rebellion and Imperial. And the thinking at the time was even like eventually we will break these out and make them their own thing, but we don't have enough material yet to make that possible. So with second edition, it's a great opportunity. Everyone's with just the second. When you're looking at just the second edition products, everyone is a more level playing field. So they don't feel like if we had introduced them as like their own factions, like with the Force Awakens core set, like you just would never play them because you'd have like two ships and
right.
Everyone else has like this giant pile of ships at their disposal. Now everyone's a little more even. So they're more viable on their own at the beginning. But then as the years go on, we'll get more and more material for the First Order and the Resistance, and that is honestly, currently that's where the new stuff is happening. So we'll be able to add to that and make those more robust over time, and they'll feel like they're growing right alongside the Imperial, the Scum, and the Rebellion factions.
So I have to ask, if 5 factions is easier to balance, would 20 factions be a potential thing for X-Wing? Are you thinking about maybe adding more factions? Is that something that FFG has in mind?
I don't know about that, too.
Thank you. What about, tell me actually the most important question. Get right to it.
Okay.
Do I have to buy all of everybody's faction ships to get the upgrades that I need on my faction ships?
You do not.
Period. End of story.
End of story.
So I don't need to go buy Imperial ships to put an Imperial included upgrade on my Rebel ship.
Correct.
Never.
If
I just buy all the Rebel ships.
I shouldn't say never. I don't think so. Because the current plan is no. Like it's very similar to what we're doing with Legion, where you can go down your faction path and you can find everything you need.
Excellent. So new or old players buy the new core set, buy the conversion kit, and then if I only want to play a single faction in this game, that is a viable thing for me to do, and I only need to catch up to what I already have and then buy new ships in that faction as they come out.
Correct.
And that's it.
That's it.
That's the end. And then get on the app, I see how to build my list. You guys can push points however you want. I build this thing. I take it to a store, some of my friend's house, play some games, in forever. That's essentially how that goes.
Yeah,
right?
I hope so.
It's excellent, Andrew. What about new players? So we got the old players kind of caught up.
Yeah.
So that seems like a pretty easy process. Did you do anything specifically for new players in second edition that is going to allow them to get in the game more easily?
I think we did a couple of things. So the core set experience is much improved. So the original core set, it's okay. You get a sense for how to play the game, but if you're just playing with a single X-Wing and a couple TIE fighters, running around trying to blow each other up, it can get kind of long and frustrating over time.
Sure.
But it's enough to kind of like be like, oh, okay, I see, and then you just get some extra ships, and then you have a good time with it. We wanted to improve that experience so that people felt even better about it when they got the core set. So we were able to do some just small mechanical tweak to the way you play that core set with the escalation stuff, where like as ships are destroyed, they can come back in. That just makes it flow and it's just more fun because you get that feeling of having more ships without actually having more ships. And then in addition to that, I think with the point costs off of the cards, that really removes that level of complexity that the casual player may not care about. Like if you're just playing with your kids, like trying to play with my kids and like having them like build lists with points and like making them think about like what they need to include, it's further than I think a lot of people need to go when they first try to get into the game. So we're including this in all the ship packs, little quick build cards that have pre-built squads that have essentially like a threat rating. And you just agree to a threat rating at the beginning, and then you can just use those cards to build a squad and then play right out of the box.
Nice.
Yeah.
So new players can come in and actually play kind of a almost exclusive to the core set format. I'm sure it could be used elsewhere. You could escalate however you'd like. But they don't have to worry about adding up their lists and figuring all the upgrades out. They just get a couple of quick build cards, grab the ships, and get it right to the table.
You got it.
Well, tell me this. How has the process been of X-Wing First Edition to Second Edition, just personally, because I know that this has probably been in the works for a while, having kind of seen how these things go. What was it like to do this as a company?
As a company, it was very difficult. It was. I really underestimated how much work it was. So sorry. But we did it, which is great. But yeah, it's our release plan is super aggressive. For like especially for the first 6 to 9 months, first year of releases. It's a lot of stuff, and tasking the team with updating every single pilot essentially, every single pilot that we were able to bring over into Second Edition. And then create some new pilots, bringing all that stuff over, balancing all the ships, like introducing new mechanics, testing all of it, is a ton of work on the development side. And then play testing, obviously, it's a lot of play testing to be done. Mm-hmm. Like you got to check out every single ship, make sure it's working. Like our play testers are amazing, and they hung in there, and they're really excited about it, which really helped. And they put in a lot of work and effort into that as well. And then in the end, after development's all done, then taking all that and then putting it into files that we can then take and then manufacture was another gigantic obstacle to overcome because of just, again, like the sheer volume. In my recollection, we've never done as many products at once for a launch ever. It's at least 3 or 4 times more than anything else we've ever done. So it's really a testament to the team's ability that we were actually able to do it. And we built in some buffer time just in case it took a little longer. It took a little longer, so I'm glad we had that there. And it took a little bit longer than that, just a bit. and I think it's going to be great. I think we're really happy with it.
Is this, given how much effort this all takes, this kind of puts a new spin on like new editions of games, right? You hear about, this happens throughout the industry a lot, where you have second, third, fourth, fifth edition of this game or that game. Are you saying that you kind of don't want to do this again, or should we
well,
expect?
I don't think we ever really want to do a second edition ever again. Like it's the goal is that we create the perfect game at the beginning, and then we never have to do that again. But I think like X-Wing, with the example of X-Wing, I think it's such a great game that we want it to be as healthy as possible, and the first edition, like honestly, just didn't allow us to realize that vision. So we knew we needed to make it better. We need to have it be on more solid ground, a solid foundation upon which we can build. So it feels like like this transition between first and second edition, is it's a very brief moment in time where we have to deal with this. But after that moment in time is over, then it's just X-Wing, and that's what it is. It says second edition on the box, but it's in the back. It's not. We didn't label it second edition under the logo, and that's very intentional. It's like this is X-Wing. I mean, the reasons why we do second editions, obviously, or third editions or fourth or whatever, always varies from game to game, and it varies from company to company as to what their goals are. But from our perspective, it's always just if we feel like there is more potential to the game that is not being realized by the current edition, we can make it better and put it in an even better place in the future, then we'll do that, right? So,
well, you've done all the hard work. And it's happening now. So
those guys did all the hard work. I just asked them to do it.
So now the next part, I think, is probably one of the more fun parts, where it's going to get into people's hands and those first battles are going to start. I just want to know what you're most looking forward to at this point.
For X-Wing?
Yeah, for X-Wing.
Well, I'm just excited to get it out there, and I think the thing I'm most excited about is what I mentioned previously, the opportunities that now exist in organized play to really do some fun, interesting things, and to mix it up and play around in that playground we're creating with the app. I think that should make it a lot of fun, because I know there's lots of like alternate variant formats out there that exist in like bootleg fashion that are also really fun, and that we're taking that we're doing something similar in a more official capacity. I think is great, because it shows that we're like, really the whole point of the game is to have a lot of fun, and we're trying to just maximize the amount of fun you can have with the game. And I feel like we're kind of giving it our blessing with the app to say, oh no, yeah, you can do all these things, and we're behind you with it, and we'll help support you.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Andrew.
Yeah, absolutely, Stephen.
Second edition of X-Wing. Andrew Navaro, head of studio for Fantasy Flight Games. We've got more coming for X-Wing second edition. Until next time, keep playing. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video or any of our other X-Wing videos, those are literally made possible by orders from our store. So all second edition products are there. They're shipping for free, and we have faction-specific subscriptions where we'll send you all of your favorite faction ships as soon as they release.
And be sure to head over to the blog where we have all of the information you can possibly want about X-Wing second edition all in one place, and we'll catch you on the next video.